So for this Shabbat, we move into another Torah cycle. We are talking about Ekev. That is our parsha for this week. And if you take a close look at all of the Torah portion, which I know all of you do, if you look at the entire Torah portion, there's a theme that kind of goes throughout, and we've heard it all throughout the Torah too. God says, if you follow the rules, things are going to be fine. Follow the rules, and you'll live in this land, and you'll be there. Follow the rules. This is like echoing my childhood. Follow the rules. I'm going to give you a good life, and everything will be fine because you're going into this amazing land. Remember, we're at the very end of Deuteronomy. We haven't made it inside yet. It's true. We're not. We're going soon. And once we cross that river, then finally everything happens and the big party happens, and we are now a people that are building our own destiny, and it's exciting and it's beautiful, but we're not there yet. We're getting the Constitution before we go into the land. And one of the themes that we see over and over throughout the Bible, certainly in Deuteronomy, is follow the rules, because you didn't earn this, guys, God says. That's not a direct quote. You didn't really earn this. I'm giving this to you out of love. And I think a lot about my own kids. There is a framework that they have to live in if they want to stay in my house. And I think there's something similar that has to happen with these ancient Israelites and God. Follow the rules, or there's going to be some consequences. Now, for me, I'm a Reform rabbi, it's a Reform congregation. I appreciate Torah, I love the Torah, but follow the rules isn't necessarily compelling for me. It's not. And for them, I'm sure that it was, because nobody would have thought, do I believe in God? Do I not believe in God? How does God make a difference in my life? That wasn't questions that they were asking. And they certainly didn't need that kind of an answer. They had the same challenges we do. How do we put food on the table? How do we take care of our families? How do I deal with illness when it strikes? How do I feel when I can't move quite so quickly as I used to? They had the same struggles. We just have them faster, right? And so follow the rules or face the consequences is great for children. But at a certain point, we're going to need more. Now, I still believe in these guidelines, rules, traditions, expectations. I believe that God has expectations of us. I do. Can I actually determine what they all are? I try, and I use Jewish tradition to try and figure out what those are. But today, I think we're challenged more because we have been trained to be a little bit more skeptical and a little bit more cynical. Not critical. Critical is asking good questions. But we've been trained to say, really, Rabbi, you're going to talk about God again? And we are challenged with some of those things in our day. So how do we bridge a gap? How do we make a connection? Can I say to my congregation here, as we get closer and closer and closer to those holy days, that God is watching, and I believe in a reward and punishment kind of an idea, I think I'd be preaching just to me. And actually, I wouldn't even preach to me, because that's not where I'm coming from either. I think I'm struck by people who want to search, by people in Boulder, Colorado, on a beautiful night will still come to synagogue. I'm struck and a little bit in awe that there are folks here in this community that are asking questions about meaning and existence, not just when do I get my tickets for Rosh Hashanah. There's enough people here looking for more. But then if that's true, I can't just say follow the rules. That's what it says in the Torah. How do we build that bridge? How do we make a connection? How can we say that Torah has meaning for us, that it's still a living Torah and not a relic? I want to go back to the Torah portion. In the midst of all of these lines saying, follow the rules, and follow the rules, there's another phrase. It says, V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha. Not V'yahavta the way we chanted earlier. That says it in another part of the Torah. But in this context, in the context of following the rules, it says, love Adonai your God. Because while I made the joke before about kids and rules and my house and all of that kind of stuff, I think we have a sense of responsibility when we love each other. We take on more when we love each other. I listened to terrible music for years because I loved my daughters. I've told that to you before. I don't know why you're still laughing, but it's true. Hannah Montana, for years I had to listen to. And that happens because I love them. And they love me, so they listen to James Taylor. Let's go back to that love. There was this great Reform rabbi, he died years ago. He was a professor at our seminary at the Hebrew Union College, Aaron Pedikowski. And he taught that there was a difference between people reading a book and reading a newspaper. You're trying to get something out of it, maybe even inspired. That's great. But Torah, he said, was a love letter. And with a real love letter, you focus on every single word. What could that meaning be? Can we find a way to have a love letter with God? Now, for a lot of us, we've been taught to see a God of the one that's the ruler, the king, the male. How do we write a love letter to a king? But maybe there's other ways. If we turn that prism, recalibrate it just a bit, we see another point of view. Can we see the Holy One not only as ruler or sovereign, but perhaps as lover, perhaps as nurturer, perhaps as parent? There isn't one idea of God. There are a whole spectrum of ideas of the Holy One, the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So how are we trying to figure out how to respond to you? Well, one way that we do that is through our worship and trying to bring different melodies. Some are different than the ones you grow up with, and I know you're angry about that, but it's okay. And then there's other times we try and make a joke in a sermon, and maybe that works and maybe it doesn't. And there are other times when we have to think about what are we doing here in its essence. And one of the things that we're trying to do is that we're bringing a new Machzor this year. A Machzor is a high holy day prayer book. Has its own name. So the prayer book we're reading is a Siddur, right? Siddur, like the Passover Seder. Seder means order. A Siddur is the order of our prayers. The Machzor is a certain idea of how do we return. That's kind of in the word. And it's only for these holy days. And the Reform movement a few years ago, before I even arrived here, came out with this new Machzor, High Holy Day prayer book. And it's totally different from what we're used to. The Gates of Repentance is very much out of a Vietnam era kind of a world. And some of the language and poetry still feels very formal. And for someone like me, I kind of dig that. I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that. I still appreciate grandeur. But I also recognize a lot of our congregants don't necessarily feel the English is so compelling, or the Hebrew doesn't have transliteration, so I'm locked out. I don't have access anymore. We have a community that participates really well on Shabbat, and while we could triple or quadruple our size for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's much more quiet because of our commitment to Hebrew, but there isn't the same access. So this prayer book, this Machzor, and there's a few copies in the lobby just so that you can take a look at. This is going to be brought to our congregation this season, next month. Oh my God, it's next month. And I think you will find that it is inclusive. I think you will find that it doesn't have one particular theology. It has many theologies in it. For some, that will drive you crazy. And then the other, it will be a welcome expression. So I want to share with you two readings. One from Rosh Hashanah. There's two different books. It's a set because it's designed the same as this way. The right side will be the traditional readings. The left side of the page spread are going to be more contemporary readings that are in the same spirit as the tradition. If you never knew that about the prayer book, now you know. Okay? So this is called Mishkan HaNefesh. And here's 3 things I want to share with you. A reading from each book, and then what the name means and how do we build that bridge. So here's a reading from Rabbi Laura Geller. Laura Geller is one of the first women to become rabbis in the Reform movement in the country, and she's been out in Beverly Hills. She says, "Your book of life doesn't begin today on Rosh Hashanah. It began when you were born. Some of the chapters were written by other people, your parents, siblings, and teachers. Parts of your book were crafted out of experiences you had because of other people's decisions. Where you lived, what schools you went to, what your homes were like. But the message of Rosh Hashanah, the anniversary of the creation of the world, is that everything can be made anew again, that much of your book is written every day by the choices that you make. The book is not written and sealed. You get to edit it, decide what parts you want to emphasize and remember, and maybe even which parts you want to leave behind. Shana Tova means both a good year and a good change. Today you can change the rest of your life. Today you can change the rest of your life. It is not too late." So that's a very different kind of a reading, so more personal than what we've experienced in years past with the gates of repentance. And now here's something else, a personal confession from a rabbi that's printed in the Yom Kippur liturgy. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to read these or not. Some of you will be inspired by these readings, and some of you will say, "Feh." That's okay. I'm all right with that. The point is that we open up enough room for you to find your place. So here's a personal confession of a rabbi. Listen carefully. I can't believe I'm reading this. Okay. "I need to speak these words aloud and to know that the universe hears them. I get caught in old patterns and paradigms. I'm stubborn and hard-headed. In the last year, I've missed the mark more than I want to admit. Forgive me, source of all being, for the sin I have sinned before you, by allowing my body to be an afterthought too often and too easily, by not walking, running, leaping, climbing, or dancing, although I am able, by eating in my car and at my desk, mindlessly and without blessing, by not embracing those who needed it and not allowing myself to be embraced, by not praising everybody's beauty with our quirks and imperfections, by letting my emotions run roughshod over the needs of others, by poking at sources of hurt like a child worrying a sore tooth, by revealing my heart before those who neither wanted nor needed to see it, by hiding love out of fear of rejection instead of giving love freely, by dwelling on what's internal when the world is desperate for healing, by indulging in intellectual argument without humility or consideration, by reading words of hate, cultivating hot indignation, by eschewing intellectual discomfort that might prod me into growing, by living in anticipation and letting anxiety rule me, by accepting defeatist thinking and the comfortable ache of despair, by not being awake and grateful despite uncountable blessings, by not being sufficiently gentle with my actions or my language, by not being pliant and flexible, but obstinate, stark, and unbending, by not being generous with my time, with my words, or with my being, by not being kind to everyone who crosses my wandering path. For all these eternal source of forgiveness, help me to know myself to be pardoned. Help me feel in my bones that I'm forgiven. Remind me I'm always already at one with you. These are different kinds of messages. And it's not that we need them just on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If we show up doing the work that day alone, we've missed it. We have all of these weeks, months, a year to prepare to begin again. But the reason why I share these 2 readings as examples is, can we be open like the wilderness, the way the Israelites received the Torah? Can we respond to something new and different that might be off-putting because it's new and different? Can we let a new truth in, or maybe the truth that's always there, but we've never allowed ourselves to hear it? Can the synagogue be a place of comfort and challenge at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. The Mishkan was a temporary dwelling to try and have an encounter with God. Our prayer book is called Mishkan Tefillah, a place where we can connect to our prayer. This new High Holy Day prayer book, Mishkan HaNefesh. How do we have a temporary dwelling place, a place that marks transition and something temporary? How can we enter that temporary space and return to soul, the soul that God breathed into us? Are we open to such a possibility? Can we figure out how we can grow, that we can change, that we can be better? If I never thought about God, could it possibly be an idea that enters? If I reject God, so what? Doesn't mean I can't learn. Doesn't mean that I can't be with my people. If I have questions, maybe this is a safe way and a safe space to enter into that place. We're moving into the month of Elul, a whole month to prepare, and then these days of awe show up. My question is, will you meet me on that bridge? Are you going to be willing to have an encounter with a new text, not just a new book, but a new way to journey, a new way to think about ourselves in the year that's coming, a good year, a year of change?